Hi everyone, welcome to my first video, learning to solder. I started off today with the camera plugged in and the microphone going, and then once I reviewed all of the footage, realised that the microphone is actually inside the casing of the camera and you can't hear it, so here I am voicing over. Today I needed to clean the workbench off and plug in a bit of the equipment that I'd purchased off AliExpress, and I'll put the links to those bits and pieces in the description. I've got a soldering station on the right with the soldering iron and the heat gun, and I'd also bought a little learn to solder kit which has some resistors and some LEDs and a little power supply on it, along with a small PCB, so that you can test your soldering skills and get to learn how to solder. And of course the different resistors there power the LEDs in different ways, so they light up dim to bright depending on the resistor that you put against them. So I just thought I'd get that out and have a look at it and see what it took to put it all together. I got a little magnifying station as well on the left hand side there as well, just so that I could see the details. Some of these components I'm looking at are quite small, so I needed a little bit of help anyway, but it can also record. So each of the components has an area of the board that they slot into. So the LEDs go at the back of the board. I'll show you close-ups of the board later on. And then the resistors go in line with each one of them, and there's a switch on top and a power plug as well. It's actually quite dinky for a learner's kit. So I'd switched on the soldering iron at this point, and I could smell some burning, and sure enough I pulled it out, and I had forgotten that the soldering iron tip had a plastic cap on it. And you can probably guess what happened. Yep, my first melt. How embarrassing, but oh well, it is learning to solder, so it was a big lesson for me. So off it goes. I waited for it to cool down and pulled off the plastic cap, which doesn't exist anymore, and thought I'd have a little bit of a break. So let's start again. I decided I needed a little bit more light after reviewing the first footage, so I bought some more overhead lights from AliExpress. I'll put them in the link below, and I was just attaching those up the top. The good thing about these is that they plug in with a USB cable, so you can have them wired, or they charge up and you can have them wireless. And because they're all the same and they operate off a remote control, I can switch them all on at the same time and off at the same time, and they have different variants of lighting and you can turn them up and down. But I thought more light is going to make it better for video recording from the bench. So that's all done. I've got a nice clear workspace, and then I don't know how to read resistors, so I thought I'd get out the little cheat sheet and figure out how to read resistors. Looks easy enough with all the color codes there for the resistance values. So I had a look at the resistors to see if I could tell which was which, and I really struggled. I mean, they are tiny, and I can't say that my eyes are the best, even with the brighter lighting. I don't know what it was about these resistors specifically, but it was really hard to read them, and you'll see this later on as I put them under the microscope. I also picked up some helping hands from AliExpress as well, so that I could put the PCB in those, put the components in, and then that would free up my hands to do the soldering work. Really handy if you ever decide you want to do anything like this. Get yourself some. At a later stage I'll try and figure out how I can make the base a little more stable, so I don't have to worry about it moving around. I suppose the hardest thing about the helping hands was getting the PCB in there so that you could actually see the soldering work on the video camera whilst I was doing it. So that's me just checking out the resistors at the moment and how they all line up with the LEDs. And I'd already put 5 LEDs in and just checking off against each one of those resistors. So microscope time now, and you will now see how hard it was for me to tell the different colours of the bands. And I have to admit the lighting from the microscope isn't the best for this type of recording, and I'll figure out the lighting. These LED lights that light up the subject, but even so, if you look at those in any type of lighting, those bands look almost the same colour from left to right, top to bottom. And at this stage I wasn't even sure whether or not resistors were directional. Spoiler alert, it turns out they're not directional, so you can put them in any which way, but I didn't know that. So they are directional when it comes to reading the bands, because the one at the end is a multiplier. But all of these resistors, I was checking them out under the microscope, and I was struggling with reading the colours. I tried my best, and you'll see later on that I didn't do too bad a guess, but I did get a few of them wrong in the end. Microscope away for a little bit, and we'll have a look at these resistors and the PCB and actually start attaching some of these resistors to the board, which means soldering. And remember that I am a novice at this and I'm learning, so I just wanted to check it all out, use this board. There's probably bigger boards I could have used to start off with, because these ones are particularly tiny components. I'm trying to read them again with limited success, if I'm honest. Now we get to the exciting bit where I actually start to solder things to the board. That's the solder that I got as part of the kit, and you work through the solder really quickly, trying to heat up the component and the solder at the same time, seeing how I do with that. I was quite happy with it for my first go. Trying to keep the tip nice and clean, so the sponge over there in the soldering station is wet. And let's bring over the microscope so I can have a look at my handiwork for my first solder. And I did figure out how to record, so let's have a look at the first solder. Oh yeah, not too bad. I was particularly proud of that one. Some of the others you could take or leave because they're large blobs of solder everywhere, and I'm going to have to learn to do better with the recording under the microscope. But yeah, I was quite happy with some of those. Big blob there. I'll have to tidy that one up later. But I was quite chuffed. So happy as I was with my first lot of soldering, I thought I would crack on and do the rest. So a bunch of LEDs, bunch of resistors, PCB board, soldering iron, solder. Let's get going. Solder gets used up quite quickly, I found. And the contact point's quite hungry for solder, especially if you're putting big blobs of solder in like I am. Yep, keep going, keep going. LEDs, resistors, nothing new here. We'll just speed through this bit fast as we can, and then I'll show you the end result shortly once I've finished soldering all of these bits. Okay, let's have a look. This is all the way along the board. Some of them are blob solders. They're supposed to look like little volcanoes, and you have to understand these are tiny. What I was really worried about was bridging between the stalks or the arms of the components. And I think when I was looking through here, I managed not to bridge any of the components. But later on you'll see that I might have, and I'm still trying to troubleshoot some of the connections. Just turning around the circuit board at the moment so I can have a look a little more closely at what was going on, and I'll put it back under the microscope shortly. And those bits at the end, which I think I bent the components a little bit, so I'll have to come back and tidy up that solder, especially that bit on the left is a bit blobby, which I wasn't very happy with, to be honest with you. You can see here the resistors are bedded in quite well. There's no solder on the other side, the component side of the PCB. It's all on the back side. But I was still checking the values of the resistors because I was sort of sure that they were okay, but then not really. Sometimes when I put the components under the microscope, I forgot to record what I was doing, but I just needed to keep on having a look at the components and the values of them, because I thought I was going mad. But anyway, I kept on going, and I'm going to just continue soldering the components, and I didn't chop off any of the little legs of the components. I'll have to find out. There's a proper name for them, I'm assuming. Component legs. I'll keep on calling them component legs. And the solder blobs are there. Some of the component legs are a little bit bent, and I'll come back and fix that later. Some of the blobs are bigger, some of the blobs are smaller. Not perfect, but learning. Congratulating myself at some points along the way. Now I've got the remaining components to just put on and check, so I will fast forward this because it's a little boring. I was still checking the component values. As you can see, I was still struggling and having a look at them, and there's a 47 ohm and 4.7 thousand ohm and a 47,000 ohm, so some of the bands were almost identical on each of the resistors, which wasn't ideal, which was probably most of the reason why I was getting myself confused with them. But I'm the type of person who's just going to crack on. I'll make some educated guesses on which is which, and then I'll put them in, spin them over, and continue soldering, and then just check them out afterwards. I wanted just to get the PCB finished and done so that I could test it. The only other issue I had was it had a socket for power, but it didn't come with a plug, so I also had to figure out a way of powering it, and I don't have a bench power supply yet. I do want to get one, but I don't have one at the moment, so I needed to fossick around in my electronics boxes and try and find a a suitable power supply that would be able to plug into this so that I could test it with 5 volts without blowing myself up. So soldering was sort of okay. I was a little bit dubious that I'd got the right resistors into the right spaces. The LEDs I am pretty sure aren't directional, but they're just standard LEDs across the board, red LEDs across the board. So I decided to finish up there and give myself a little bit of a break, and then have a think about the resistor values, and then come back a little bit later. The new lights were installed, and I remembered that I had a multimeter, or as Steve calls it, a multimeter. So I thought I should be using this to test the resistance of these resistors, and they should be able to give me the value. So I went through them one by one, and I wrote them down in a notebook. And I was not too displeased with what I'd done. I got 3 of them wrong out of the resistors I had them. So I wrote them down, and then I had to desolder these resistors. And I spent a little bit of time. Given that it was soldering practice, I didn't really mind that. So I wrote them all down, and then I started removing them. So I'm going to fast forward this a little bit, but I will show you what I did, because it's soldering practice. I desoldered the parts, and they're tiny, and the solder was, I'll call it sticking. So it was a little bit difficult, and the helping hands were helpful, but not when you're pulling components out of the board. And whilst I've got a solder sucker, it wasn't particularly helpful sucking the solder out of these components, and I think it's because of the solder that I was using, probably a lead-free solder. I've got to get to know a little bit more about the different types of solder, but it was actually quite hard to pull some of these components out. And then I used some ribbon to try and clean up the board as much as I possibly could. I have to admit, the multimeter made things a lot easier. The ribbon didn't help me as much as I thought it would. So again, I think it's either a technique that I'm not doing, and I'm going to have to brush up on that, or the solder wasn't reacting particularly well to the copper in the ribbon. So that's me just trying to get some more of the bad soldering out, because I need to clear up the holes to put the components back through again. Otherwise I'm going to find it very difficult to push them back through. So I keep persevering with the ribbon and the soldering iron, and managed it in a way, and cleaned up the board. I did not clean it with isopropyl alcohol, which I do actually have, but at that stage I was just wanting to clear out the old solder and put the components back in, and then I needed to check on how I'd done with the desoldering. So now you'll see the result that I've got with the desoldering of some of the components, the ones that were wrong. I'm only taking out the components that were incorrect. So those ones, so that's the component I'm trying to remove, and it was being stubborn. So here I'm just going to spend a huge amount of time just trying to remove some of the resistors, or 3 of the resistors that I put on wrong. And it's really hard to see, but I'm trying to heat up the solder and pull the resistor off at the same time, Just there's no leverage there, and it's really hard to do. I managed to get all of the resistors off eventually, but it's just incredibly difficult to do it. So then I thought, I need to remove the solder. I need to use a different tool. So I went and got the solder sucker. You have to realise there are no instructions on this thing. So just pull it out of the packet, put the nozzle on, and try and figure out how it works. But I think the premise is the solder is heated up, the solder turns to liquid, and the sucker can suck the solder off the board just through the pressure that's built up within the syringe, basically. So the plunger goes down, and it's got a little trigger on it that you push, and the theory is that sucks the solder up. Easier said than done, as my experience tells. But the first thing I needed to do, given my experience, is find out whether or not the nozzle is going to melt. So I did the melt test by just putting the soldering iron on the nozzle, and yay, it didn't melt. So I went and got the longer nozzle, stuck it on the end of the solder sucker, and we'll see if it works. As you can see, the board is now complete. Switches on the top right hand corner in pink, and the power socket is on the top left hand corner. And what's more, I found a power supply that where the plug actually fits that socket and provides 5 volt. Happens to be from our exercycle, but we won't miss that for the short period of time I need to test the board. So we'll plug it in, and I didn't have a chance to test this before I actually plugged the board in, so we'll see how things go. So plug in the power, and let's see, individual switches. Switch runs power through the resistor and lights up the LED from a small resistance through to a high resistance. First switch. These switches are tiny, so tiny. Yes, we have power. Second, no power. Okay, let's keep going. Third, we have a little bit of power, maybe a dodgy connection. Fourth, same dodgy connection. And we keep going on along here testing the board, and it's about this time that I realise that more work is required, and I will continue doing that in my next video, and you'll see how we've progressed in troubleshooting and getting it all done.